Enforcement Program Oversight Committee, and I'd like to call this meeting to order.
Your microphone's on.
How do I turn?
Got it? Okay.
Sounds like it is. Okay, let's start over. Is that better?
Nope.
No. I don't. Well,
Be loud.
crazy. Very crazy. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Better. Okay. Nancy Corrigan. I'm the chair of the California Board of Accountancy's Enforcement Program Oversight Committee. And I'd like to call our meeting for July 25th, 2019 to order. And let's start by taking roll. Mr. Savoy.
Michael Savoy.
Nancy Corrigan.
Carrie Ann Carol Hines.
Dan Jacobson.
Alicia Verhoff.
Very good. Looks like we have a quorum. So moving on to... There we go. That's our last one. We're all present. Thank you. Okay. Moving forward then, I'd like agenda item 1, approval of the minutes of May 16th, 2019. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. Any further discussion from committee members? Any discussion from the public? Seeing that there is none, please call for the vote.
Alicia Burhill,
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Carol Hines, Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
and Michael Savoy.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Motion carries. Agenda item 2 is a discussion and possible action regarding licensees who completed the general experience requirement providing attestation-related services and associated enforcement activities. Mr. Franzella?
Thank you. Good morning, members. This item is before you today at the request of this committee. The paper provides information regarding licensees who perform a test-related work who have only completed general experience and associated enforcement activity, and highlights a set of policy topics associated with accounting firms providing a test-related work when the firm is owned solely by licensees who have only completed the general experience requirement. There is no specific action required on this item. At the bottom of page 1 and carrying on through page 2 and part of page 3 of your materials is information on the experience requirement for CPA licensure. I'll just quickly touch on a little bit of that. Applicants must complete a minimum of 1 year of general experience. This experience includes providing any type of service or advice involving the use of accounting, attest, compilation, management advisory, financial advisory, tax or consulting services. Individuals issued a license who only complete the general experience requirement can perform a wide range of accounting services, except they are not authorized to sign reports on attest engagements. Attest engagements are defined by the CBA to include an audit, a review of financial statements, or an examination of prospective financial information. This definition does not include compilations, and the board defines this in CBA Regulations 2.4. For individuals that do wish to have a CPA license that authorizes them to sign reports on attest engagements, in addition to completing the minimum 1 year of general experience, they must also complete a minimum of 500 hours of experience satisfactory to the CBA and attest services. So in the middle of page 2, I've highlighted what the minimum 500 hours must include. And to satisfy the requirement, licensees must have a certificate of attest experience submitted on their behalf. And in attachments 1 and 2 are the certificate of attest experience forms, and applicants must have this form or a compilation of these forms affirmatively completed for all 5 areas. So on page 3 of your materials, and I apologize to the members who are using purple paper, it looks much different in the white version, the white paper version, and on the tablets. On page 3 is a graph showing the number of licenses issued with general experience versus those with attest experience. The bigger number is the general, the smaller number is the attest. The colors just don't correspond when they are printed on purple, so I apologize for that. For the 3+ years that are shown, all the higher volumes are for licensees issued with general experience, so it's outpacing them by quite a bit. We have far more general licenses issued than a test or licenses issued with general experience as compared to those with a test experience. So in the middle of page 3 and most of page 4, I've included information on enforcement activities associated with individuals who were issued licenses with general experience but perform a test services. I've provided 3 examples from the past few years, which includes the charges that were alleged and the accusation and the resulting discipline. At the bottom of page 4 and over the next few pages, I've highlighted a new issue that has kind of begun to arise, and specifically instances where accounting firms solely owned and operated by licensees with only general experience performing attest services. As I've noted in the materials, the CBA does not issue accounting firm licenses that are specific to general or attest experience requirement, and thus there's no prohibition against this type of service. On page 5, I've included CBA regulations section 50.1 that was adopted by the board, I believe, back in or around 2009, that makes it clear that such services by an accounting firm solely owned by individuals with general experience requirement is allowable as long as specified notifications are provided to the clients or potential clients. As none of the ownership would be in a position to sign reports on behalf of the accounting firm would presumably either have a staff member who is also a licensee with the authority to sign attest reports on attest engagements, or contract with a licensee with the authority to sign reports on attest engagements to be either the engagement partner or be the signer for the accounting firm. While this regulation provides appropriate client notification, there are some additional policy issues related to the work performed and how best to identify who is responsible for the work product. So, though it's not an exhaustive list, on pages 5 and 6, we've identified 3 policy issues: peer review, quality control policies and procedures, and work paper retention, as issues that probably need to be discussed by the board. And EPOC could recommend to the CBA that it assign evaluation of these policy issues, including any identified by members today, or both at the board or this committee, to the CPC for consideration. And staff are actually recommending that the CBA sign this review to the CPC for further deliberation at a future date. That concludes my remarks, and I would like to turn discussion on this item back over to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Franzella. Do committee members, do you have any questions for Mr. Franzella regarding the presentation? Yes.
So, as the non-CPA on the board, so when folks get their CPA license, and especially when I first started on this board, I just automatically assumed that they could sign off on a test or anything like that. Is there a way to, and maybe Michael can answer this, do you see maybe breaking it out with a CPA to have a special designation to just do general accounting, where it says CPA GA or a CPA full test? I don't know. I'm trying to.
Well, the issue is that the public
figure that out.
has no clue.
Exactly.
You see CPA after your name.
Right.
They assume you can do a whole bunch of things.
Correct.
That you're clearly not qualified to do.
Right.
As we've seen come before us many times over.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still having trouble getting my arms around a sole owner of a CPA firm who has a general license that issues a test reports as a firm. I'm having some issues there because you're talking about who takes responsibility. The person signing it that obviously has a license, but he's not a shareholder or a partner of that firm. So, yeah, I can see there could be some issues here, widespread regarding that.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody can say CPA general. I mean, I don't think that will happen unless we require that to happen, to let the public know they don't have their A license. I think the whole problem with 2 sets of licenses.
Right.
Public is just not aware.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
And that's my concern.
yeah, I
Right.
don't know if we can address this in some other way or deal with this, because I can see this posing some major issues down the line regarding responsibility. I how can the firm take responsibility when the owner of the firm doesn't have any license? So,
Well, and responsibility would include peer review, it would include some issue, liability issue that comes up down the line, document retention, this person that had the attest experience and signed or whatever, leaves the firm, now what do we do? Back in 2009 or whatever year it was, I don't really remember, but I served on a very large task force, and the discussion, it had all sorts of individuals on it, and the discussion about whether to designate, Nancy Corrigan G license, CPA G license, Michael Savoy CPA A license was totally shot down. And of course, at that time, there was some concern about, well, what does happen in later years? And I have had a concern, and part of why that has come to this committee. So here we are, grappling with this issue. And I don't know, and how do we even know to monitor it? How do we, unless something comes up or happens, there's such a delayed reaction to all of that,
yeah, I mean, we're never going to become aware until there's an issue.
Correct.
End of discussion. It's just.
Correct. Absolutely.
And you're not in front of it, you're behind it.
Yeah.
Are you seeing other states, though, that are dealing with this is like we are?
It's not an issue, it's generally not an issue in other states because most, probably all, but maybe one or two have moved entirely to general experience requirement for licensure. So they don't generally have this kind of, this issue. And so, speaking to Mr. Savoy's points earlier, I can vaguely recall the discussion when 50.1 came around, and the board's initial discussions was more about realizing the impact of not so much a business model, but realizing there was more Gs coming in than As, that Gs were inquiring about being able to provide the service and how can it be done while safeguarding consumers, and the board created the notification requirement. The question is, does the board need now to explore some additional policy questions, not just with the notification? Is the notification still sufficient? But are there there's underlying policy concerns about peer review, supervision, work paper retention, quality policies and controls and procedures and things of that nature, that if a G licensee is the owner and bears the responsibility both for the good and the bad of the firm, how do we make sure that continues and protect consumers? So again, with the other states question, a lot of them moved to G licensee solely, so it's not the same kind of issue. Some states have not attest firms, but only require firms to register if they're performing attestation services. And other states have different definition of what attestation service is. So it's just different state to state.
And why would the owner having a G license, doing audit work, want to even take that responsibility?
More money?
Money.
Exactly.
It's above and beyond his scope, certainly.
Well, and that's my concern, because, sorry, go ahead.
Adding to the list of potential issues, Dominic, have there been any issues with liability insurance? Or have you heard of, has the CBA been informed of any liability insurance issues from insurers or from anyone else, say is the sole practitioner with a G license who then contracts with someone with an A license? Do they end up with a lower premium? Anything on that?
No, the only information we ever get on insurance issues generally is just the requirement that they make a declaration of what type of insurance they have for corporations, but it's not something we monitor. It's something I'm happy to kind of reach out to Cameco, who tends to be the larger provider, and get some information and report back at some point.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, when you fill out a form for insurance, you're supposed to state the level of work you do, and the premium is coinciding with that level. So if you say you're not doing audits, they're going to pay a lower premium, but if they get sued on an audit, then they're personally liable.
Right. And what happens on that application is you indicate the percentage of tax, general accounting, audit, whatever, consulting, So you do give that information so that the carriers can determine what those premiums would be. And I think maybe, Mr. Franzella, you told me perhaps that in California, the G licensees are outpacing the A's almost 3-to-1 at this point? Is that,
That's
did
what
I
it
get
looks
that
like in
from
the
you?
stats.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
that's-
wasn't here, yeah, okay.
I would say it's been that, I mean, that trend, if we went back further, it pretty much started happening shortly after the G license came on, within a few years, back in 2002. I think that's the first year of G licensure. Shortly after that, it started to outpace the A license pretty quickly.
Why do you think that is? Is it, well, yeah, but I mean, are you seeing this like in the younger folks who are just saying, hey, I want to do a G license and just do general
Right.
accounting and be done?
I can only speak to a degree that it was my understanding prior to the G license being an option. And UAA was moving that direction. The board evaluated this back in the early 90s or mid-90s as the national trend to move to G licensure because individuals were believing it was getting the experience, the attestation experience was an impediment, a barrier to licensure, especially if you were working for a small firm and gaining your experience in that environment, that they created a pathway whereby peer review would be kind of the backstop for a test level work. The licensure process is really kind of what do you need to know, and even the exam does this to a degree. The first 2 or 3 years into the profession, you'd be working within a firm, not necessarily a bigger firm, but within a structure that was going through peer review, and that's how you would check and balance the A work. California didn't follow suit. They did create the G licensure to eliminate a barrier, but didn't get rid of the A because they believed it was important to consumer protection that those individuals providing this level of work have this level of experience done. And so we've maintained that. And so the G license was designed to create an opportunity for people to not have a barrier any longer who weren't ever interested in providing the attest level services. And kind of, that's a very crib notes of my understanding behind it.
So is it the committee, yes?
Yeah, I would like to see if we could explore something, kind of expand this. So before I came onto this board, I just thought that every CPA was the exact same. So as a public member, that concerns me for the consumer. They just assume that, okay, if I have a CPA, they'll be able to do not only general accounting, but attest work and that type of thing. So for me, I would like to see if there's a way we can explore this to figure out a solution.
Okay. And is that something that we would request that the board direct the CPC to deliberate on, or something that we would explore further?
Maybe more research about, how this is affecting the public, what firms who have general accounting experience or doing attest work when they're not supposed to be. I mean, I would like to see a little bit more data as to what this looks like. Because
Before we
if,
decide
Mr.
to-
Frenzel is talking about how other states are not really dealing with this as much as we are, I'm concerned about that.
Okay.
I'm happy to do whatever's necessary.
Would you like to help us with some research?
Of course. A lot of the concerns are policy related, broader than just enforcement. Some of them will go towards outreach. Some of them will go towards consumer notification. Some of them are about, work paper retention. There probably will be elements that are enforcement related, but staff's recommendation at this point would be that future discussion, and this has happened before with either EPOC or CPC, requesting that from this committee that the CBA directed to the CPC for kind of how to attack it. Do they want to go through it piece by piece, globally, do some additional research? But there's broader policy issues beyond just what enforcement generally does, the EPOC committee generally does. So,
Okay.
Yeah, so I would recommend we bring it to CPC, and whether it's picking it apart piece by piece or globally, I'd like to see the parameters that we have in place, how to stop this before it gets to a point
Right.
of litigation and/or consumer problems. Just to review it again, just so we clearly understand what we're dealing with.
Okay, so
agree.
review it again here or recommend that that happen?
CPC.
CPC, okay, and so was that your motion?
Yes.
I'll
And do I-
second.
And a second. Any other discussion from committee members?
Could the motion be repeated again by the chair? It's a little hard to hear that last speaker.
Yes, well, there is a motion for the EPOC to recommend to the CBA that the CPC deliberate on various policy issues associated with accounting firms with a G ownership providing a test work. So we have a motion and a second to that effect. Any further discussion from committee members? Any comments from the public? Seeing that there are none, please call for the vote.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan,
Yes.
and Alicia Verhouse.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item 3. Are there any public comments for this committee? Seeing that there are none, agenda item 4, agenda items for this committee for the next meeting. Seeing that there are none, thank you so much, and I adjourn the committee meeting.